Hey everyone, John Cannon here. This week we have something a little different for you. Our very own Toria Ainsworth and Sam Harris had the opportunity to welcome author Katrinka Mannely into their home to discuss her new book of short stories called Section 130. These stories are about modern human-supernatural exchanges. Sirens, fae, Sasquatch, djinn, demons, ghosts, zombies, and even the Tooth Fairy are all players in a book that all Beast of the Week fans are sure to enjoy. We hope you enjoy their conversation, and we'll be back at you again next week with the conclusion to Bigfoot on Mount St. Helens. Stay spooky.
This is not good! Worlds are colliding!
We were smart enough to not say, Houston, there's a light out there that's following us.
And what the hell is that? You know, what is that? And I couldn't even talk. I was just amazed at what I was seeing.
This is the Beast of the Week podcast.
So, if you would like to introduce yourself, or I can introduce you, doesn't matter.
I'm Katrinka Mannely, and I am the author of a newly published book called Section 130.
Could you go into a little bit of background behind why you chose that name?
Sure. I chose Section 130 because as a young person, I was forced to volunteer at the library and learn the Dewey Decimal System. And Section 130 is the section designated for the supernatural, which I read my way my friend Carrie Linder and I read our way entirely through the whole section from start to end, and kind of fell in love with all things supernatural at that time, and still love all things supernatural.
Nice. I really like that.
Yeah, I have no idea of really anything of the Dewey Decimal. On this age, I just kind of look until I find something, and that's about it. And
sadly, no one needs the Dewey Decimal System anymore. It's another piece of useless knowledge that...
It's like cursive writing in French.
Exactly. I don't know about French. Cursive writing.
Yeah. I think eventually everything, at least to me, or isn't it like fiction is categorized a different way from nonfiction?
Yes, and so it is the nonfiction section of the supernatural. So,
okay.
So it is sort of, I guess, more speculative about, what may be.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That's even cooler. I was thinking it was like the subsection of fantasy or something, but I think that's even cooler.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot that we go off on Beast of the Week that is mostly like you would call nonfiction. It's almost like scholarly articles about...
I wouldn't necessarily call it scholarly articles.
Well, I mean, for definitely for the Loch Ness Monster, which is...
Okay. I wasn't on that episode, but...
No, that was very early. That's episode 2. We definitely got into some scholarly articles about the ecology of Loch Ness and things like that, and is there enough food for Nessie to eat, etc.
Is there?
Well, I think there could be. Yeah, there's a pretty large population of like eel. Yeah, and like bottom feeders and things like that. That could something that big survive? I would say yeah.
Well, I did go to Inverness with my sister Trish, and we did specifically spend a day around the loch searching for the Loch Ness Monster.
Nice. That sounds like a lot of fun.
I feel like she's out there.
Oh yeah. No, I think at the end of the day we said we can't say it's not there. Usually that's how the episode ends is we're like, all right, it's there, or it's definitely not there, or it could be there. We don't know.
Those are basically... Wow, that was such a good summation, Sam.
It kind of covers the whole range of possibility.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we don't like being wrong, so we just kind of throw a very large net out.
All right.
But yeah, so...
Well, I do think lake monsters are a big enough phenomenon around the world that it pushes you towards that could be.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Actually, you have a short story that centers around a more local lake monster that is actually pretty near and dear to Sam and I because we both went to school up at UVM up in Burlington, Vermont. So
in the tropics.
In the tropics,
as we call it on the show. Anywhere in New England, we call it the tropics.
Okay. I don't really get it, but okay.
Because it's anything but. although right now, in the middle of July, it's getting up there.
Yeah.
I definitely don't want to be in the sun.
Yeah. No, I'm from Tacoma. Well, I live in Tacoma now, and Tacoma's very temperate. We have a little bubble. We never go higher. We never go lower. And so when I planned for this trip, I kind of forgot that the rest of the world's not like that. I didn't really bring any shorts or anything.
Oh, no.
Anyway, yeah, I get what you're saying. But to go back to Champy.
Yeah.
Champy was inspired. I used to live in Boston for many years.
Okay.
And I've always been fascinated with cryptozoology, so I was totally into Champy. And my sister lived in Burlington at the time, and there was a festival on the New York side of the lake, a Champy Fest.
Okay.
And so I got maybe a dozen friends together, and we all came up and went to the Champy Fest, which was really more of a sidewalk sale. It was not much of a festival. But yeah,
it's still a fest.
I actually hadn't even heard of it until I read that story in your book. I didn't know that there was a little festival on the other side. And it should be one in
St.
Burlington.
Albans.
No, St. Albans is in Vermont, Sam.
What am I thinking of? What's the New York City on the other side?
It depends on which.
Directly from Burlington, pretty much.
Plattsburgh?
Yeah, that's it.
It's been so long, I don't remember. I just remember we got there late, so we kind of missed most of it. But a local man did sing a song about Champy, and my friend Amanda convinced him to sing it again since we got there. So that's kind of the highlight of the trip. And then we went around on the lake looking, for the monster, of course.
Yeah, no, I mean, if I understand the singing, because if there's anything that this show is consistent about, it's that we sing in pretty much every episode, and none of us can. But we still do.
Usually prompted by Sam.
Okay.
Badly playing on the piano.
Oh, well, the one song I can play on the piano.
Yeah.
But either way. So, because, born in New England, I assume?
No, actually, I was born on the island of Guam.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. That's the actual tropics.
That's
That's the real ones.
Yes, I have no recollection of it other than stories I've been told, but my dad was in the military, so we've lived in a lot of places.
Gotcha. But I assume so. But a good part of your life was definitely in New England, especially during a fascination with cryptozoology.
Yep.
Have you ever been up to the Cryptozoology Museum in Portland?
I have not. I am aware of it, but I have not been there, but it's on my list.
Yeah.
It's on our list, too.
we also have not been up there. I mean, we're pretty much in Portland on Friday, and didn't go.
Well, we were picking up our new friend.
Yeah. If there's any audio problems for the audience, it sounds like somebody is opening up a bag of infinite sun chips. It is a new kitten.
Playing with a little crinkle ball.
Yeah.
Very
He's loving
happy,
it, though.
yeah.
Yeah, no, he's...
See, he gets around, though.
He's getting all of his energy out. So...
He's so cute.
I didn't think of, concrete questions. I thought we could just kind of have a discussion.
I do have one.
Okay.
Definite concrete question. So reading the first short story in section 130, your book, there was a lot about, it was kind of like demons. Mm-hmm. And then reading later on, the 27th?
Try, yeah.
27th try. It's, like I said before, I want to say 24th every time. I don't know why. I just like that number. But the 27th try, the first short story kind of deals with a demoness, or a demon, or a devil. And the 27th try deals with more angelic forces. So is there any influence from, I would assume religious texts in some way, but maybe even more obtuse with cryptozoology and those articles, kind of like anything about the Ars Goetia or Anything by Aleister Crowley, Lovecraft?
Oh, well, I mean, in terms of my influences in reading?
Yeah.
Well, when I went on that aforementioned trip to Inverness, I saw an exhibit of Aleister Crowley's tarot cards that he had done.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, I'm very interested, and I would say my influences are wide and varying. The biggest one for the angel story, I went to junior high school, and college in Idaho, in southern Idaho, big Mormon country.
Yeah.
And so you can't grow up there without hearing lots of stories of the Mormons and history of the Mormon Church, which is fascinating. So that had a lot.
No, it's funny because our host is distantly related to
John Smith,
the founder of Mormonism, which is why I started laughing. Because John's the editor, so he's going to hear all of this.
John is incredibly Mormon.
No, he's not!
He's got a big Mormon tattoo on his head. It says Mormon. Every time I see him, he's just like, hey, bud, want to read the good book? And I'm like, well, is it Batman? He goes, kind of. It's Mormon Batman. It's about John Smith, not Bruce Wayne. But... Sorry, that was a tangent.
Yeah.
That was like an improv tangent. But
I have to tell you, I belong to a writing group, and I actually belong to a couple, but one that's, my number one primary writing group that I love is a group of people. We all took a writing class together, and we stayed together for years. And we were reading that story, and everybody was laughing and stuff, and I said, I should probably have a Mormon read this story and see, make sure it's okay. I'm not offending anyone. And this guy, Dennis, popped up and he said, well, I'm a Mormon and it doesn't offend me. It's like, okay. So
yeah.
There you go.
So I maybe got some of my facts straight, I hope.
I would definitely say I'm not Mormon, but as a Catholic, it's not offensive in like a hierarchy sense or anything like that.
Good. And then I was going to say the other influence personally, I was raised Catholic, so I grew up in the whole Catholic tradition with, lots of stories about angels and saints and everything. And I don't know if my sister Trish has ever told you the story about the Virgin Mary. She and I and the Virgin Mary. Well, I don't know if either of you said you were Catholic, so...
I was raised Catholic.
So you know this.
Yeah.
So when you're raised Catholic, there are all these stories. The Virgin Mary always appears to people. It's usually children and old people. And every time she does, from my perspective as a child, she would ruin their lives because she would show up and she'd say, like, go tell everybody you saw me. And they would go tell everybody, and everybody would say, you didn't really see her. And they'd go back and say, everybody says we didn't really see. Well, go tell them again. And, okay, we saw the Virgin Mary. No, you didn't. And so anyway, finally, Virgin Mary will do a miracle and say, yes, okay, everybody, look, I really did appear to these children or these old people, and I am real. And then those children, those old people are vindicated, but then they always become nuns or priests. And so I was not interested in any of that, and I was pretty afraid of it. And so when we were children, my sister and I had bunk beds. I had the top bunk, she had the lower bunk. My sister was really into saints and saintliness and thought it was a vocation, was very interested in pursuing that as an adult. And so I can remember being in the top bunk, just sure that the Virgin Mary was going to appear to us and that I was going to get stuck in this trap. And so I just remember being like, don't appear, I'll do anything, just please don't show up. What I didn't know until many, many years later was that my sister was in the bottom bunk saying, Virgin Mary, why aren't you appearing to us? So we were sort of canceling each other out for all those years. But
that's very funny.
It's almost like someone's playing Bloody Mary in the other room, and you're saying, I hope no demons show up tonight. Well, you got way too many teenagers. And
one scaredy cat.
Yeah, demon gonna show up. Although I think scaredy cat usually in a horror story survives decently long enough as a voice of reason.
Yeah.
And then right before the end,
you gotta have the jock save it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jock always saves it. Because they're the strongest from all the football.
From all the football.
Yeah, when you play a lot of football, you can fight off Jason Voorhees. That's one thing I've learned.
That's a lot of football.
Yeah, it's quite a bit, but I feel like Lawrence, Taylor could probably take down Jason on a 1v1. I mean, he broke Joe Theismann's leg, so
Joe Theismann's thigh.
Yeah. I know. Sorry, that was a bit too much sports.
Well, speaking of horror, your book is technically considered as part of a horror genre. Could you talk a little bit about like maybe your horror influences, favorite horror stories, movies, what have you?
It's a good subject because that was actually a surprise to me. I didn't know that was going to happen until it happened. My publisher is here in New Jersey, and I'm in Tacoma, Washington. And I have actually never met him in person. It seems like a great guy. But when he sent me the cover of the book with all the inside title pages and everything, it was like, wow, he classified this as horror, and I really had to think about it. Originally, I was like, no, and then I thought about it a lot, and I was like, okay, well, I guess maybe it could be. There's a couple, I guess in general, if you've got a ghost and a witch, maybe you just automatically go there. And there is one story about a possessed pet rock, maybe, that kind of goes there. But anyway, I don't have a lot of horror influences because I'm the scaredy cat. Who would survive. I would make it very close to the end, for sure. I can tell you about that. I have had real life experiences with real life ghosts, and I am the one who's like, I'm not going upstairs because there's a noise up there, and no, I'm not going.
We'd love to hear about some of those experiences. Definitely, for sure.
All right. Well, I'd be happy to do that, but
continue.
about the horror influences, actually, I've been commissioned to write a horror story for an anthology, and it's been a bit of a struggle for me because I've always been afraid of horror movies, and so it's something I've been researching a lot lately. I've been reading a lot of anthologies of horror stories. I read this awesome one that was all horror stories that take place in Portland, Oregon, not Portland, Maine, but and it was just really funny, and I didn't find them really scary stories, but I loved them. And I think I'm leaning toward myself the kind of horror stories that are more really social justice stories, like, wrapped in the guise of horror. Mm. And when I went to the last Norwest conference, I signed up. I went to all the sessions on horror because I'm just trying to school myself. Yeah. And it was shocking because there was like a session on body horror and a session on haunted houses and a session on animal horror. And it's a way bigger genre than I ever knew. So I'm just still myself trying to get there.
If you want some more influences, our first episode, I'm not on it. It's before I joined as an official cast member.
Don't say it.
I'm not going to say the name of it. Last time we mentioned the name, our host's, all of his equipment shut down.
Failed.
Oh my.
Yeah, we just said the word and everything shut down.
Wow.
You have to text us.
I'm going to be listening to this on the drive home.
So our first episode is probably our scariest. I would recommend maybe listening to that. I'm not going to say what it is.
Okay.
The title of the episode speaks for itself.
The gardening tool.
It's a type of gardening tool.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's
for leaves.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's probably close enough.
Yeah.
All right. I'm not going to say it out loud because I don't want the whole thing to go.
No.
I mean, you drove all this way. I would hate for Tori's computer to blow up.
Just blow up.
But I also, that reminds me of something else I have to share about horror.
Definitely.
That I think relates to this podcast. Have you heard of Ed and Lorraine Warren?
Yes.
I would say that they absolutely influenced me. When I was living in Boston, when I was much, much younger, a friend of mine, it was around Halloween time, and she was just like, she was going to one of the millions of colleges around there. And she said, let's go see this couple, this paranormal researcher couple. They're doing this presentation at the college tonight. And I was like, I knew nothing about what I was getting into. And I was like, okay. And so I go to this presentation, which was one of the scariest nights of my entire life. And during the intermission, I was so scared. I would not go to the bathroom. I was afraid. It was terrifying. And they kind of tell their story. They were young couple, and I don't know how much you know about them, but went on a honeymoon. They got married very young and went on a honeymoon in Europe, and they stayed at a haunted castle. And together was with a ghost, and then they kind of just...
So is it like the honeymoon was a chicken or an egg for the business? Did they say, I would like a haunted honeymoon, which sounds
kind of great.
Yeah, I would tempt that, I think, but... or did they...
What I got was that it was accidental.
Okay.
I can't say for sure, but it was a long time ago, but that's my recollection. And they told increasingly, like I said, terrifying stories. including the story that the movie Annabelle is based on, which was the kind of at the end, really scary thing they told us. But one of the things that was really formative about they believe first of all, they believe everything is possession. Like basically all hauntings are really, at the end of the day, they're really just demonic possession. Mm-hmm. And that you think it's a nice spirit of like a happy person, but really it's a demon tricking you.
Yeah.
You know, and so pretty much everything comes down to but anyway, one of the things they talked about over and over and over was this concept of recognition. Mm-hmm. And so the idea is that, so first of all, a demon possesses something in your house. It's really a dead loved one. So you will pay attention to it. And the more you pay attention to it, the more recognition you give it, the strong saying the name of the episode out loud. That's recognition. Yeah. And that's the Pet Rock story, is really very much based on that whole idea.
Gotcha. I have not made it to that one.
Well, I can tell you about my, ghost experience.
Sure.
I have a couple, but
go for it.
Well, I was going to say, I'll cut to the best one, but Carrie Linder, who I mentioned, who read all of Section 130 with me, her house was haunted when we were in junior high. And we had, we called her ghost George. And we thought it was fun that she had a ghost in her house, except, you know, late at night, sometimes it wasn't quite as fun. But I mean, that's not really that fantastic of a story. But much later, when I lived in Arlington, Massachusetts, I lived in an apartment with 3 other roommates, one of whom was my sister. And there was a landlord on the first floor and we had the top 2 floors. And the second floor was okay. And the third floor was kind of crappy. It was like, had been the attic space. And so the rooms were really kind of yucky and small. Yeah. And we heard that the third floor had also been at one point servants' quarters, which of course is always good for a good ghost story. Mm-hmm. And so lots of things were happening around the house, and all 4 roommates, particularly the ones who were less, believing in the supernatural, all of us were sort of in agreement that something was going on in this house. And, it was typically, it was a male ghost who was appearing, like a young male ghost who was appearing, and people were seeing him out the second story window. People were seeing him on the back porch. And particularly my sister, who had one of the upstairs bedrooms, was seeing him. She'd wake up in the middle of the night and she'd see him standing over her bed. That's terrifying. I've never heard this story from her. You're kidding. Well, it's amazing that you haven't, because we tell the story a lot. Anyway, and we thought, at that point, we didn't really believe my sister that she really did have a ghost standing over her, because my sister has really poor eyesight. And we were all like, there's no way if you woke up in the middle of the night and someone was standing over you, you'd even know, because you can't see. So we don't believe you. And so we didn't really take it all that seriously. And then, many things happen. But the big event of the whole thing was one particular New Year's Eve. My sister was away in Costa Rica. My other roommate, Eva, and her boyfriend, Chris, had partied a lot, and he got really sick and was throwing up all over the place. So rather than throwing up with her in her bed, she thought Chris should go to my sister's room and sleep in her bed and throw up all over her room. Nice. Yeah. Nice friends. Yeah. Well, New Year's Eve logic. Yeah. So Chris, who had been very skeptic about the ghost, which, by the way, we called him Fred. We thought it was really cute and funny, and we had this ghost named Fred. And Chris had always been skeptic about the ghost, was sleeping in my sister's bed. And I should have told you that at the time, my sister was a poor college student, so her room was full of poor college student furniture, including a nightstand that was a milk crate. Mm-hmm. And on top of the milk crate was the famous bean lamp, which was a giant wine jug that had been filled with dried beans as the base, and then a light bulb and a light shade stuck on the top. Gotcha. I guess you guys are not familiar. But by the looks on your face, I'm seeing you.
But that sounds honestly pretty nice.
Well, it's nice for a free hand-me-down when you're in college. So anyway, so she had her bean lamp. And so Chris was there in her room, and he woke up early in the morning, and he saw the ghost standing over him, as it often stood over my sister. But Chris decided that, he would react. So he took the bean lamp and threw it at the ghost. Oh no! And her bedroom door happened to be right in front of the staircase. So the bean lamp went out the door, crashed into the wall, and broke, and all the beans and all the glass went cascading down the stairs. Now, I was on the second floor, and I heard all of this. And I was like, I'm not going upstairs to see what's going on. Whatever it is, it's not good. And
not me.
Nope, I'm staying here. And so the next day, my sister came home from Costa Rica, and there were still dried beans and broken glass.
Oh no.
And she's like, what happened? And we were like, okay, we all believe you about the ghost now. He stayed with us pretty much the whole time we were in that apartment. And I did like make a big deal about saying that we were going to hire a psychic and have a big Halloween party and try to communicate with him, which I had no intention of doing, but I just wanted everyone to come to our Halloween party, which they did. And then everybody was like, where's the psychic? Which there was not one.
They couldn't make it.
Double booked.
But that would started a great tradition. We had many Halloween parties many years after that, so it was all worth it. And the ghost never did anything truly threatening. I mean, mostly he just kind of stood over people and looked at them. But yeah, I can remember many nights of laying in my bed feeling like that ghost was in my room. And again, just like not turning around, not closing my eyes. I will just wait here until you go away. That's my ghost strategy.
Yep.
Fair.
I know our co-host, John, he believes that his apartment is definitely haunted.
Yeah.
And more so, he has a cabin up in North Conway. And definitely haunted. But it depends on who's there. It's definitely, depending on who's there, you can feel good or downright awful. Yeah, but there have been nights where we did not feel great in that cabin, so I definitely think that's haunted.
Well, New England's so old, everything's so old, you know, there's a lot of opportunity for things to become haunted, I think.
Yeah. It's weird because my house that I grew up in, my dad and my grandfather built, so it's not an old house, 100% haunted.
Do you still go there?
Yeah, it's my house. But like growing up, I'd like hear people upstairs. Like it sounded like the TV would be on upstairs, and it wasn't. I was home alone, and like people like walking around upstairs, and I was the only one home. And
we had that with Fred a lot. A lot of times you'd be on the second floor, and you could definitely hear somebody walking around upstairs, and it was like, okay, just stay up there.
And there was one night that I was up really late, around like 11, 12 o'clock, working on a paper in, I think, like high school. And I go out into my kitchen because that's where like our little office was, and it's like right out to the kitchen. And we had a hanging basket of pot holders. And I came out into the hallway to get like some water or some juice or something. And I'm like standing there, right, like just turning the corner, and it is swinging like a lot more violently than like, oh, the wind blew or something like that. Like it wasn't like violent, but it was definitely like somebody walked by and like pushed it, and everyone in my house was asleep except for me. And if anyone had gone into the kitchen, I would have seen them because the only walkway into the kitchen, they would have had to pass me. So yeah, no, that house is definitely haunted.
I also, because I know you're going to edit this, John, maybe. Maybe Toria will. But I think you're haunted. Because John's always a centerfold in every haunting I've ever had.
Really?
Any, like, bad vibe house, John's there. So maybe John's haunted.
I mean...
maybe he brings it out. He's a faux
maybe, yes, maybe he's more receptive.
Yeah.
Well, because my experiences happened well before I knew John.
Well, no, I get that, but I've stayed at your house plenty.
Yeah, that's true. And John has also stayed at my house, and he's like, yeah, no, that place is haunted.
And he would know.
Yeah. I know that, like, a couple of the, like, more paranormal investigation shows, which, you know, who knows how true they are. They're for, you know, cinema and...
I once went to this awesome event in Salem, Mass. It was the annual Harry Houdini Seance. He died on Halloween Eve, and he and his wife had a very big interest in seeing if somebody could communicate after they were dead. And so they had made a pact with each other that whoever survived the other one would do a seance for a certain number of years on the anniversary of their death to see if, you know, they really could communicate. And so when I went to the seance, it was well beyond the time period that they had originally established, but they just kept it going.
Yeah.
And the tradition was that wherever they would, the seance would travel around, wherever they would do the seance, they would get a local medium to do the seance. And this was like a giant banquet hall kind of thing. Like, you know, we got a free mug for showing. And
banquet.
Yeah.
That's
and
really cool.
There you go.
But anyway, so all the local witches in Salem had some sort of an issue. I can't exactly remember what it was, but there was something about this seance that pissed off the local witches. So everyone refused to be the medium for the event. And so when we all got there and we all paid, $20 for our ticket and our free mug and everything, like we were like, okay, we're ready for the seance. And there was the guy from the museum, the Harry Houdini Museum, and he was kind of the MC, but there was no medium. And so he held a contest, and he was like, he had an envelope, and he was like, whoever can come up here and tell me what 3 items are from the museum are in this envelope, you can be our medium for the evening. And it was hilarious. And all these witches went up there and they tried, and no one could guess it. So the guy from the museum just did it himself.
That's hilarious.
There you go.
I have a really good vampire story though for you.
Yeah.
Do you know about the casket girls? Have you researched them for anything?
No, I have not.
So my daughter, who is 11, was recently very interested in the TV show The Vampire Diaries in the originals.
Okay.
And so we planned a trip to go to New Orleans, and we went to the originals is set in New Orleans, and she was really excited. We went to all the locations where they shot and everything. And we also went to this cool vampire store while we were there. It was sort of a very vampire themed vacation. And there was this lovely lady at the store who just spent tons of time talking to us. And she told us that one of the formative New Orleans stories is about vampires, these casket girls. And so when New Orleans was being settled by the French, it was like this disgusting swamp, and no one would want to live there. And particularly no European women would want to live there. So there were all these guys, no girls. And so the Frenchmen wrote back to France and said, you have to send us some women so that we can settle this disgusting swamp and make it into something.
They were like, we'll take some crackers, we'll take some rum, women. So,
yeah.
It's kind of, this is a ledger. Can you just get women? Please?
Women.
General.
And Paris is like, yes, crackers, yes, cheese, and oh, yeah, women, okay.
Here's some women.
And so what they did was they went to the orphanages, and they got the older girls from the orphanages who were like, ready to be married off, I guess.
Yep.
And they sent them to New Orleans. And because they were orphans, they had no dowry. So the city of Paris gave each one a pine wood box and a wedding dress in that pine wood box to be their dowry, their casquettes. And so there are 2 legends about it. One is that they were approached by very enterprising vampires in France who wanted to go to the New World and said, like, we'll pay you if you let us be in your box. Like, take your wedding dress out and let us go in your box and transport us to the New World. And the other legend is that the girls themselves were the vampires, and that the casquettes were, what they slept in during the daytime. Yeah. And when they got to New Orleans, they were immediately taken to a convent, and the casquette boxes were taken to the upstairs in this convent. And so it's got like these very spooky stories. You can walk by it and you can see, and supposedly there's all these stories of people looking out the windows and weird things happening around there. But I guess they even celebrate it. They have a festival and everything, and it's like this legend that everybody in New Orleans knows.
Those were the first.
Yeah.
That's
and
really cool.
Some of the first.
I just like that, the vampires are like, okay, everybody's going to the New World. We want to go too.
A lot of fresh meat.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. That's organic at that point. There's nothing there. There's nothing there. It's just corn, and Squanto is teaching people how to put fish in the ground and the bones and all that. Teach you how to make a good crop. I remember Squanto. I played Squanto at the school play. I was Squanto.
But you still have your Squanto knowledge.
Yeah, I know the one thing. I don't know if there's much else. I'm sure there's so much else, but I know the big one. The big one that made the settlers survive, and then later on everything was awful. But it is interesting, especially like vampiric knowledge. So do you know any other vampire stories about like anywhere else along the East Coast or even the West Coast from...
No, I intend to write one about the West Coast. It's definitely in my plans. I was very inspired by the whole casquette story. I can't say that I know of any specifically. I had this awesome experience once when I lived in Boston. I kind of actually lived outside of Boston, and there was this bookstore in Cambridge. And this guy was coming to read from his book about, he had done all this research on Dracula, and he was coming to read from his book about Dracula.
Nice.
And it was when the Anne Rice novels were very popular. I think it was even before they became movies. And so it was a really well-attended book event, and we were all there, and the guy talked about his book, and then he was like, does anybody have any questions? And all the questions were about Anne Rice's books. Like, everyone in the audience just wanted to talk about Anne Rice's characters, and he kept saying, like, I don't know anything else.
I only know Dracula. I only know the OG.
Yeah.
The original.
Yeah.
No, it is pretty interesting though, the way that like vampiric knowledge has spread throughout New England, especially New England itself, really being kind of like a scapegoat for tuberculosis. And the way that people start looking,
and the ebb and flow of lifelessness, and then back they like, because the way that TV goes, I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Episodes of like, I'm out.
You have episodes where you look like you're, you know, like almost dead, and then you'll have like bouts of energy, and you'll look like maybe you're cured, and then you're back to looking dead.
And somebody thinks you snuck some blood in between those.
Yeah, so like
because it's you cough up blood.
You cough up blood
with tuberculosis, so their lips would often have blood on them.
Yep.
Wow, I like.
And they were very pale, and that's where like the like pallor with blood red lips, that like kind of like viscid,
the Bela
like,
Lugosi look.
The Bela Lugosi look.
Yeah.
And like there's a common thought that like Fall of the House of Usher is a type of like psychic vampirism, because a lot of the things that the characters go through mimics tuberculosis, but also it's like definitely a vampiric story. There's other Poe that is definitely vampiric. Tuberculosis and like borderline
TV-centered.
Yep.
Works.
Well, I think vampires are endlessly fascinating and endlessly being reinvented in like new ways, and I think that makes them fabulous characters.
Yeah.
You know?
Speaking of reinvention, I really enjoyed your zombie short story. I thought that was a very interesting take, and not really like common, of the zombies actually having somewhat of a coherent thought, even though it's a little slow.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
I really like in my stories to mix technology with the supernatural, to mix all of our regular daily life with the supernatural, and I think that's a lot what inspired that story was Google Translate. Like the idea of it.
Yeah.
But I think that it's actually my daughter's favorite story in the book, so I read it at readings quite often. But I also think part of the reason it is her favorite book is because she relates to her phone, right? She's got her phone every day, and so it's bringing those two ideas together. And, zombies are interesting. I've researched zombies, and they're another one of those ones where they're different kinds of zombies, and you try to figure out like what's the zombie origin, and really a lot of it is really contemporary in movies and very different than like the West Indies kind of zombie. But I think it's another one that's really ripe for reinterpretation. There's lots of ways of thinking about zombies, and I like that my zombie. Well, all my stories are really about what supernatural beings can teach us about being human, and my zombie is all about, take advantage of life while you've got it. Like that's his sort of message.
Yeah,
I liked that a lot.
It's interesting that you brought up zombies in the conversation, because so there's, like you said, there's so many different types of zombies, and we've been saying this, that we've been begging for a classic, Caribbean zombie movie for such a long time. That
actually like gets the facts straight and like doesn't make it into like the racist propaganda of like the original zombie movies.
No.
What was that one? Rainbow and the Scorpion?
There's that one, or something like that. It's not, I don't remember the name exactly, but there's that one. I want to say Night of the Living Dead was also based in a very, like, the original one. I think there's a remake.
there is a remake.
And the remake is
Ty Burrell.
Yeah.
The one in the mall.
The Night of the Living Dead is definitely where, at least what I've read, that's where the brain started. The brain eating is all from that movie, that it doesn't go any further back than that. But yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think it's one of the things I love things like podcasts is because you dig up the supernatural stories from other cultures and other places, and not just, the ones that we're familiar with, you know, and it's always really fascinating, and to hear those stories, and also then it gives you some sort of insight as to like the TV story. What were they afraid of? What were they dealing with?
Yeah. Because, we definitely try to do that a little bit on the show, where we'll look at different cultures and see, what kind of things that haunt their
continent now.
Yep. What things haunt their nightmares,
have any good,
and
like, Chinese or
We're definitely gonna hit on China with when we finally do vampires, though.
Yeah,
because
no,
the Chinese vampires
is way
completely
cooler.
different.
Way cooler. I don't want to bring it on back to vampires, but have you ever heard of the way that the Chinese view vampires?
I can't say that I have.
So I think you explained it the best, Toria. No? All right.
No, I think you do.
So how it works is the way the vampire's story is that they kind of do the zombie like hands outstretched, and I think that might be actually what that's from. And they hop.
Yeah, they hop. They're hopping vampires.
They hop at you, but they don't stop. They hop, they don't stop. They keep on coming. And the reason why they believe that these are vampires is because when people would die, they would take two poles, and the gravekeepers, they didn't have like a wheelbarrow. They just had two dudes, one back, one up front, two poles, and they would string the arms of the dead to the poles and then just kind of hold them.
Wow.
You know, just go. And so, and the thing about the Chinese vampire is that it's not just one. It's a lot of them, kind of like a horde mentality, because these two guys would have maybe 10 to 15 dead people strung up like this, hopping. And like eyes open, kind of like this, just hopping.
That's so horrifying.
Oh no, it's wicked dark, but it is interesting how that, like, why is that like a vampire? I don't recall why it's a vampire, but you know, it's almost, I don't think yokai is the right word. That's more Japan.
That's more Japan.
Yeah.
Trying to go back on the train of like more cryptids and stuff like that. You have a very interesting story about a Bigfoot family. Could you talk a little bit about your inspiration for that story? Because that one had me laughing a lot.
Well, I guess that story is a lot about. Well, it's a lot about. They're always a lot about the human. The human character is kind of obtuse to nature, and in this case, the nature represented by the Bigfoots, the Bigfoot family. I used to joke. I live in the Pacific Northwest, you know, and that's prime Bigfoot country.
Yeah.
And so we're always on the lookout. My family and I, we're always on the lookout. We joke. We have like a game we play when we're driving, you know, like the animal points game, and you know, you can get like, you know, 5 points for fox and 10 points for Bigfoot. So we're always looking.
10?
Only, yeah.
Two foxes is one Bigfoot?
My daughter's pretty stingy with the points. Like, if she sees a duck, it's worth like 100. If I say Bigfoot, 10 points.
10 points. It's not that great. You heard it here first, folks.
10 points.
There's Bigfoots all over the Pacific Northwest. 10 points.
Yeah.
10 points.
Yeah. And so I always joke, you know, I think I even had a joke for a while that's in the story where it's like, I'm going to go to Costco and get some cheese puffs for the Bigfoots, and, you know, go see them. And I guess that's kind of what I'd like to imagine, that you just go hang out with Bigfoots and, you know, exchange. And so I guess that's really, I mean, I've always loved Bigfoots even before I lived in the Pacific Northwest, but there it's very prevalent. I don't know if you guys have visited, but...
No,
Not yet. I would like to.
And
I'm a big fan of Bigfoot.
It even goes back to, I don't want to misrepresent, but I really do think that there are Native American stories in the Pacific Northwest that relate to Sasquatch, and that they have some sort of, you know, drawings or iconography that you could maybe say, you know. So I like to think we have a good chance of having one nearby.
It's probably that. I mean, didn't we talk about the Seatic?
Yes, we did talk about the Seatic, but that related a little bit more to the skunk ape, because
which is a type of Bigfoot. So what we found out, and by what when I say we found out, I mean John did the research and then we read the notes, was that, what was it, Bigfoot is a rectangle and Sasquatch is the square, where like there are many types of Bigfoot. And Sasquatch is the species.
I got you.
Oh, Sasquatch is the species.
No, Sasquatch is Sasquatch is like the direct species.
And then there's like...
Bigfoot is like the family.
Yes,
yes. Okay.
So it's kind of like how a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle is not a square.
I gotcha.
So we recently did an episode on the swamp ape, which is a type of Bigfoot.
Skunk ape, babe.
Oh, swamp ape. Skunk ape. which is found in Florida.
Okay.
And we talked about its possible relation to the Native American Siatic, which is a very similar...
Another thing about that little family of Bigfoots that inspired it is that with cryptoids, you always hear the criticism that there would have to be a family, right? There would have to be children. They would have to reproduce in order for the... And so it was very important to me that they be a multi-generational family so that you could have that.
And that's something else we talk about where like the possibility of like a breeding population. Because like with the Bigfoots that you wrote about, they're definitely more humanoid than like bestial, I guess.
And my Bigfoots have been very exposed to human culture. So,
it was like a Goatman. Goatman is very human.
Yes.
I listened to the Goatman episode.
I did recommend that one. How did you like it?
I did like it. Scientist becomes a Goatman, gets mad and leaves, and becomes violent.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a Scooby-Doo episode.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of these really are. People love Stephen King. People love, Lovecraft and Crowley and Poe. But, I mean, legend, R.L. Stine, does not get better than Goosebumps. Doesn't get better. It really makes you think. But, no, I'm kidding. Sorry to all the people that appreciate those very good authors.
Those other authors.
Yeah, the other schmuck side.
After we released Goatman, listening to the story that we read at the very end of the episode, I was driving home late at night, and I had goosebumps from like just how creepy. And like Sam and I were recording it, and I don't remember if it made the cut of the episode or not, but while we were reading it, we kept kind of looking behind us, feeling like gonna creep up behind us.
I don't think the story made the cut because I don't think I remember the story you're talking about.
That we'd take turns reading in the round, because that story that we read should have been in the episode.
Maybe it was, but I don't remember it. I'll have to go back and listen.
Yeah, definitely do, because that's one of my favorite parts about the Goatman episode is the scary story at the end. It's called the Anastasi's Goatman. Yep. What was your inspiration for offending the senses? Because that made me giggle.
Well, I guess that was more of a writerly inspiration, actually, because I've been in several writing groups, and there's a writing group I was in that I'm no longer in, but the leader of that group really had a big thing about when he was critiquing stories, he'd always talk about, you need to bring in all the senses. You need to have every sense represented in the story. And that was kind of my goal when I wrote that story, was I'm going to have a story where all the senses come into it and they're an important part of the story. And so that's actually what inspired it. And I don't know. I guess I get carried away. I liked the idea of the story is about a husband and wife who are approached by Venus, the goddess Venus, and she decides, she's impressed by them, and she decides as a reward to them that she's going to make love to the husband, and they don't want her to, and so they try to offend her senses to get her to stop. Yeah. It's one of those things. Once you start rolling, it's kind of fun, and I started thinking about. Because you're fighting a goddess, that would be hard. So what could you possibly do to make a goddess, to wage war on a goddess? And
offend the senses.
Offend the senses.
You're the opposite of ambrosia. What is kind of like the... What do you think the opposite of ambrosia would be? If ambrosia is milk and honey?
Well, for me, it would be mayonnaise.
I don't know. I bet, Dionysus could get down on some mayonnaise. He could probably party with mayo. That dude's good with it. He loves grilled cheeses.
Yeah. If not mayonnaise. I don't know. Pollution, some kind of toxic water.
Ozone.
Yeah.
I can see that. I mean, they're all up on their Mount Olympus.
Yeah.
Get rid of the ozone layer.
They're all fried.
Everybody Helios is going to be pissed.
Yeah.
Helios is probably sitting there hey.
This is great.
Boone's Farm or something, like the wine of the humans would be the opposite of the wine of the gods.
Mad Dog. Give them some Mad Dog. No, they're gone. They're out of it. All right. I just figured that'd be a funny question.
Yeah, no.
That's it.
Paranormal that you'd like to share?
I haven't had as many as maybe I'd like to. My sister and I am a fan of ghost tours. And I tend to, like, if I'm in a city that has one, I will seek them out and go to them. And I went on one in York, which was absolutely terrifying. And it was terrifying because a lot of the stories they told were like they brushed on the Holocaust, and they talked about real horrific things that created real horrific hauntings.
Right.
But we went to one in Edinburgh, I think. It was in Scotland. And I don't know if you know the story of the Close.
No.
So the way the housing was set up, it was like basically these very, very large buildings. And you didn't have a front door. Instead, you had a tiny alleyway between two buildings, which was called a Close. And you'd go in this alleyway, and then from there were doorways into the buildings. And, they were like big tenement housing sort of thing. Like lots of families would live there. And so what happened was and there were doors on either side of the Close. So you could close it. Maybe at a certain time of night or something, you'd close it for security to close off the whole building. Yeah. Well, when the Black Plague happened, as a sort of way of quarantining people, they would close them in. And so people would be in the building infected with Black Plague, and other people would be in the building who were not yet infected with Black Plague. And you would either get it or you would starve to death inside the building. And it was hundreds of people who were just locked in these buildings to die. And so they took us. First they tell you the story, right? And you're in the little alley thing, and you're like, oh, that's awful. And then they take you into one of the buildings, and they, talk about all the people who died here and the circumstances under which they died. And they said that, and you definitely, even if you don't feel the paranormal kind of piece of it, you just totally
feel the empathy,
freaked out and sad. And
absolutely.
They said that it's a common thing for people to do these fundraisers there, where they basically, like how little kids will say, for every mile I walk, give me $1. Well, so for every hour I can stay in this building overnight, give me money. And many groups have tried, and no groups have stayed the whole night in the building. Anyway, so that was a super creepy one. I live in Tacoma, Washington. I'm very proud to be from Tacoma, Washington. It's an awesome place. You should come visit. I was thinking about this too. I was going to tell you about this. I don't know if you've heard about it, but it's definitely something you should consider for your show. They're in the I can't think of it. The rainforest in Washington State. There's a legend of rainforest octopuses that live in the rainforest, not in the water, like go from tree to tree.
Interesting.
Yes.
What?
That's really cool.
Do you remember the show? I forget. It wasn't Life After Earth or whatever. It was. It might have actually been Life After Earth. I forget it. It wasn't the one like what happens when 10,000 years from now, the Earth decays. Here's what happens to Boston, etc. It was kind of like 3 million years from now. After the Earth decays, what happens to the wildlife? And I think there was a whole episode. I remember there was one called Flish.
Flish?
It was birdfish called Flish. And I love the fact that they were just like, we're going to give them a name. Because they're real. These are Flish. You heard it here first. And one of them was about, I want to say most of the show pretty much ended up at the same conclusion, octopus. Every conclusion was like, octopus, way smarter, way better. 2 arms, people, we did good. 8 arms, get out of here.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
Yeah, octopi are incredibly smart.
Oh no, they're wicked smart. So they would like swing almost like marsupials and not marsupials, monkeys. Things like that. They would swing. There was giant like tortoise octopus. Pretty much everything was octopus.
Yeah.
Eventually, it was like everything's an octopus now.
Well, it could happen. To come back around, though, I was going to say about Tacoma. Yeah. So we have hopefully the octopuses in the trees up in the rainforest, which is kind of not far from us on the Olympic Peninsula. But in Tacoma itself, I did a ghost walk, and we have a lot of really fascinating stories there. And also, supposedly, the very first UFO was spotted over Mount Rainier, which is something, you can see it from Seattle, you can see it from Tacoma. And there's a lot of theories that it has something to do with the fact that Boeing is also there. And it may have been some top secret Boeing research, but I like to think it was a real UFO. And it was spotted for the first time ever in my hometown.
There you go.
That's cool.
I mean, we have not yet touched on aliens because it is much like
lot.
Bigfoot. It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
We're daunted by it. We're afraid of it. What? So I'm looking right now at the cover of section 130, and what is that a picture of on the cover?
Well, that again was another nice surprise, just like finding out that it was classified as a horror fantasy. I sent all the stories to my publisher, and I remember thinking, like, what could he possibly put on the cover of this book that would speak to all these stories? That is a very fancy library. Okay, so it was referencing Section 130, Dewey Decimal System, but also you can see in there, I think there are statues of, I want to say, maybe Greek gods, and there's a painting on the ceiling, you know, and I think, you know, so I think he did a good job kind of thinking of something that would work with
all of them, or as
the
many as
contents
possible.
of the book, yeah.
I'd agree so, and on top of that, one thing that I noticed, and I love about this cover, is it almost seems off. There's some parts that are just not, like,
Square.
correct, and I kind of like that because then they correct themselves as it goes in. I do actually enjoy that very much.
What do you mean?
So, like, if you look at the two angels on the ceiling, they're perfectly center. If you look at the thing in the middle, the display, perfectly center. The walls, though,
Are off.
the walls are off. The ceiling is off, but everything that surrounds them is perfect. And I kind of like that. I think it might represent, like, the book in a good way.
That it's slightly askew.
Yeah.
Things are
Not maybe what they seem.
You know, like, the stories are mostly pretty happy. I mean, there's a lot of good endings in there for the most part. I honestly, I was expecting
More death and destruction.
yeah, a little bit.
With the horror.
Yeah.
With the horror tagline, but
Well, I think I tend to be a more upbeat person in general.
No,
there are a
definitely say that knowing
few.
you.
There's one, not to spoiler, but there is one that ends in death. Although I'm not certain that it's clear to people that it ends in death because I had my mother-in-law. You know, often I send my stories out to people close to me to read, and she read it, and she was like, "What happened to the girl at the bottom of the stairs?" So, not sure she totally got that.
Yeah.
But, and there's, I don't know if you read the one about the fairies, but that one is
did.
a little sad. Yeah, it's a little sad, I think.
I feel like that one. Sorry, when you said fairies, I was thinking the tooth fairy one, and I was like, no, that one's very
no.
happy. No, no, I know what you mean. One.
The one about the guy who traps the fairies.
Yeah, that one was very sad.
And again, it's really about him. You know, it's the supernatural beings are just there to be the lens that we see ourselves through.
No, I really enjoyed the book, and I can't wait to actually finish it. I had wanted to finish it completely before you got here, but ran out of time.
Thank you. Well, that's really nice to hear.
Yeah, no, and thank you so much for taking the time out to drive down and be on the show.
That's incredible.
I was when I
we are so honored to have you here.
When
this is amazing. We could never imagine this at the start of things.
Yeah, when I reached out to you initially, I was like, oh, like we can set up like a Skype date and we can just like record the audio like that, and then you were like, oh, I'll just come down. And I was like, do you want to?
Yeah.
Well,
sure.
I feel the same way. I'm really honored to be here. I was so excited. I've just recently started listening to podcasts. I haven't been a big podcast listener, and it's really kind of weird because I was saying to my husband, like, I should research and see if there's any podcasts that, might connect with what I'm doing. And it was like last week that I said that.
Nice. Because Trish invited me to your book book tour. Mm-hmm. And we were going to be up in his grandma's house, and so I was really upset that like I wouldn't be able to make it up. So then I started talking to Trish, and I was like, oh, like, do you think she'd be open to an interview at all, even though I can't come up for the book tour? And she was like, oh yeah, I'll put you in contact with her. It's like, okay.
Well, works out well for everybody then.
Yeah.
That's cool.
That's perfect.
Yes. And this is my very first podcast, very first time being a guest on a podcast. I'm very excited. I'm very excited to tell everyone.
Well, you definitely fooled us because I figured you've done this before.
Yeah.
You've been a great guest. So, For all the listeners out there, make sure you read Section 130 by
Katrinka Mannely.
There she is. It is published through, it's a ZMOC?
ZMOC, which is a division of Winged Hussar Publishing.
Gotcha. Just wanted to make sure I said that. So that
Thank you.
you know. And
I believe you can find it on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and like a couple of other...
You can get the book, yes, like you said, on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Target.com.
Gotcha.
there you go. And it is a delight. If you like short stories, if you like something a little bit more snappy, as I said before, the vodka shot of a story, instead of enjoying a...
Nice deep wine.
Well, I'm not saying that one's not nice.
No, like
nice.
a deep wine. Like
Yeah, no, you gotta
one of those
sip it.
big
or,
cups.
or a martini.
Yeah.
You gotta take your time. And this is perfect for those that want everything the book has to offer tenfold. So, highly recommended on my part.
Yep. That recommendation is definitely second in on my part.
Well, thank you very much. I really want you to write that down for me, that it's the vodka shot of stories, because I think that's like the nicest review.
As somebody that loves vodka, yeah. All right. Well, this has been the Beast of the Week podcast. I'm Sam Harris.
I'm Toria Ainsworth.
And I'm Katrinka Mannely.
Do you want to tell our listeners to stay spooky?
Please stay spooky.
Heard it here, folks. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, and drop us a line about your own spooky stories that you have kicking around in your life.
Absolutely. Well, check them out. Just for a little something. It is on Twitter, Truth is Stupid, and on Facebook and Instagram, The Truth is Stupid.
Do you have any social media plugs that you'd like to make?
Yeah.
I just have myself on Facebook right now. That's one of the things I need to kind of get moved. Oh, well, I actually have a website, which is called 130andbeyond.com.
Nice.
Perfect. So
Perfect.
check out 130andbeyond.com. And like we said, check out Barnes & Noble, Amazon, as well as Amazon.
And Target. You said
Did I say
Amazon twice.
Oh, God damn it. I'm trying to be serious.
I know.
I feel so much more serious than when I'm usually recording.
Just go to Amazon, because everybody has Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I got mine literally in one overnight.
Yeah. It'll get to you quicker. So,
Well, thank you again so much. See you later, folks.
stay spooky.
Stay spooky.